will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me.
Thanks for joining us today on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. This is Senator Amanda Chase with Cut to the Chase on our radio show today. It is a weekly town hall that you can tune into each week, and I hope you'll join us. I actually serve as your state senator in the 11th Senatorial District, which includes Chesterfield, Amelia, and Colonial Heights. And, I've really enjoyed my time out of session meeting with constituents. I usually have office hours every Tuesday and Thursday, and you guys are taking me up on it, and I love it. We've had a lot of interesting issues coming up this week. People asking me my opinion on Convention of States. We've had an investiture ceremony for Supreme Court judge. We've had folks to come in and talk to me about legalizing medical marijuana. It's been an interesting week, and I've been interviewing people that are interested in applying to be judges, so it's been an exciting week. But I look forward to, I know a lot of people are really curious, what do you do as a citizen legislator, which is what I fully believe I'm supposed to be. We're supposed to be transparent and let you guys know that we're fighting for you in the General Assembly, which we are definitely doing. Many of the topics that we're going to address on this show, as you know, if you've tuned in for a couple of months now, I talked to you about issues that real people are bringing to my attention, and we're going to do this every Thursday from 4 to 5. I think I'm the only legislator right now that has a weekly town hall, and I'm so excited to bring my colleagues in on this because I tell you, I think this is a great venue for all of us to talk with you, and I'm really excited about two of my favorite people that are going to be guests on the show today that will be coming on in just a few minutes, Delegate Lee Ware and Majority Leader Delegate Kirk Cox. But I first of all want to thank former Delegate Chris Saxman, who filled in for me last week while I was at the Convention of States participating in a simulation, and I would like to emphasize the word simulation. And it was really neat. We had 3 legislators, state legislators, from every state from across the U.S., and we presented, we actually went through a what could possibly be an Article 5 convention. Hasn't been done in a very long time, hundreds of years. And I'm a strong grassroots activist who's actually participated in a number of conventions and have seen quite a few shenanigans, to be honest with you, going on behind the scenes at some of our Republican state conventions, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to participate in that and appreciate the leadership taking in some of the feedback that I provided for them. And we are going to have a show exclusively for the dialogue on Convention of States. It's going to be a hotly contested issue. It's going to be all over the newspapers coming up this session as the Senate hears it this coming session. So I'm trying to get ahead of that and keep you all informed and make sure I am fully educated on the particulars of that and how it's going to impact those of us real people here who have to deal with the consequences of all of our legislators. If you're tuning in for the first time, you may not have heard of me. This is my first year as a citizen legislator in the General Assembly. As I mentioned earlier, I do serve you in the state Senate. I'm a wife. I'm a mom of 4 kids. 3 are teenagers, so y'all pray for me. And a 20-year-old daughter who is attending a Virginia State College. I actually drove all the way 2 hours away to have dinner with her last night and drove back, so I'm a little tired. But my husband and I have a financial services business, and my kids have a grass cutting business, so anybody need their grass cut, look us up. I'm also a proud Virginia Tech Hokie. I'm real. We're real people. And I actually grew up in Chesterfield County, graduated from Monacan High School, right up the street from here. And Chesterfield has been our home for over 35 years. So, one of the things I know from talking to you all and as I listen to folks throughout the district, one of the things people say is, I am so tired of out-of-touch politicians. So I have done everything I can to stay in touch and communicate with you. I talk to constituents, I talk to reporters. I actually gave them my cell phone number, which is considered crazy. But I've done it just so that you all can get my side of different issues, and hopefully they don't twist some of my words. Sometimes they do, but that's okay. Having town halls and now this. So I really do welcome your feedback. If you have a question about today's topic, I'm going to invite you to call in. I want you to get a pen, and I want you to write this number down. It's 454-1366, and hopefully our phones are working today. If you're shy and you don't want to go on the air, you can email us your questions at info@amandachaseforsenate.com, and I'm going to do my best to answer your question on the show. So let's get started. Today we are going to continue our discussion on economic incentives. Okay, the whole point, I'm just going to break it down for you. I'm going to cut to the chase. We're trying to figure out, how do we keep the jobs that we have in Virginia? And how do we bring back some of those jobs that have left Virginia? And how do we attract new corporations and new businesses? We have a number of mom and pop shops. We want to make sure that we've talked about, in general, reducing regulation, the importance of keeping taxes low in general terms. And I want to, drive this home today. There are so many things that we have talked about. We've talked about, what are some things that we can do? If you look at the CNBC polls back as far as 2007 when they first started doing these studies, Virginia was number 1. And where are we now? Sadly, we're number 13. I don't like being number 13. I'm pretty competitive, and I like to be number 1, as I'm sure Delegate Lee Ware and Delegate Kirk Cox do. And, many of us legislators are working, putting our heads together, talking to small business owners, talking to different groups, business folks, chambers, you name it, to try to figure out, how do we fix this problem? One of the things that I've looked at is the bank franchise tax. As many of you know, I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank in Richmond. I was in management there a couple decades ago. And we had a number of banks that were headquartered right here in Virginia. And many of those have gone. And where have they gone? They've gone to Charlotte, North Carolina. I even had an opportunity last night to talk to one of the vice presidents at a local bank. And I said, what do I have to do to bring the headquarters back here to Virginia? And so I've been looking at ways to increase job growth in Virginia. And I've come back to find out that some banks will not come back to Virginia until we get rid of the bank franchise tax. And I'm going to stop right there because I just love Delegate Lee Ware. He has so much foresight. Every time I think about a possible good bill, I can just do a little quick search and see that he's already got one ready to go, or he's already passed one, or he's just so forward thinking. And, I'll tell you a true story before I introduce Delegate Ware. It was Christmas Eve night. This is a real story. It was Christmas Eve night, and if you remember correctly, the Attorney General had just come out with an executive order which basically had to do with restricting your gun rights, which I'm a huge gun rights activist. About 4 of the 7 bills I put in had to do with our gun rights and strengthening those. But this particular executive order would basically restrict your gun rights across state lines. So Delegate Lee Ware already had a bill in. I called him up on Christmas Eve night. He already had House Bill 20 in, and I said, hey, would you like me to take this up in the Senate? And he said, yes, I would love for you to do that. And so we did. In 24 hours, I came back to him and had all 21 Republican state senators co-patroning this bill. I figured, if they're co-patroning the bill, they're going to say yes. So it's kind of a slam dunk, kind of a little strategy going on there, which Lee definitely, I think, agreed with me on that. So I just appreciate Lee. And so, Lee, are you there?
I am, Amanda. It's good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear your voice today. Lee represents the 65th District in the Virginia House of Delegates. And how long have you been there, Lee? Since 1988, is that right? Or 1998?
1998. 98 is exactly right, Amanda.
Very good. And Delegate Ware is a Republican. He is chairman of the House Finance Committee. He's a ranking member of the House Committees on Rules, Commerce and Labor, Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources. He's also served as the chairman of Joint Committee of Legislatures from both the House and the Senate, searching for ways to expand wireless and other internet services, which I want to talk to you about because Amelia's got some issues. But I'm so excited to have you on the show today. We've got just about a minute, and then we're going to come back to Lee. But can you tell us real quickly about your House Bill 1224, which has to do with that bank franchise tax liability?
Thank you, Amanda. It was a bill that we had in the current session, 2016, and what it did is put a cap on Virginia's bank franchise tax. It did a number of really positive things in that regard. It put the cap currently above the average payment of our largest banks, and what it does is gives certainty to banks as they're planning their tax requirements and the other requirements that they have as they look down the road. And with that certainty, it's both good for our current banks, and it has I think, an attractiveness that could possibly make Virginia more palatable, more acceptable, more inviting to other banks that are looking at the banking and business climate.
Lee, don't go away. Lee's going to come right back. Delegate Lee Ware here. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Don't go away. Welcome back to AM 820 WNTW Radio. This is Amanda Chase, your state senator, serving you in the Virginia Senate. And we have Delegate Lee Ware, who also serves in the General Assembly. We've served together, and, right before the break, we were talking about this bank franchise tax. And you know what I love about Delegate Lee Ware? He's a retired teacher. And so he can explain this stuff in a way that we can all understand it, which is what I'm most appreciative about, because I know many of you are out there listening and going, what in the world is she talking about? Bank franchise tax, fees, and liability. So, Delegate Ware, will you explain all that to our listeners today?
The bank franchise tax is one that is passed on banks, and it's based on their financial status. The larger they are, the larger the tax. And it's one of a series of taxes that we have on businesses in Virginia, and so we just felt it was time to put a cap at the upper end, particularly in this turbulent time in our economy.
Well, I would have to agree with you, and I think it's something, working in the for the Federal Reserve Bank and in the banking industry in years past, decades past. One of the things that concern me is that a lot of people have left Virginia and gone to North Carolina because they had a job in the banking industry, and now they've moved to North Carolina. So I'm really glad to see that you had the foresight once again to introduce this type of legislation. One of the other things that I really wanted to talk to you about is something that is called Go Virginia. And, like I said, all the people that I'm bringing on the show, I have so much respect for. And I really wanted to get your thought. I know you and I are in agreement and some of our concerns that we have about Go Virginia, but I'm going to let you explain to folks just kind of your thoughts on economic incentives and the role of government in that process.
Amanda, thank you. Go Virginia is a bill that came through this session, had support of a lot of good people that you and I share a lot of convictions with. One is going to be on your show shortly, Kirk Cox. What it would provide, or what it will provide, it did pass both houses, was signed by the governor, it will provide for the setup of a board, growth opportunity in Virginia, that will allow regions to tap into some state resources and some local resources over time with the hope of creating distinctive regional growth opportunities. One of the things that concerned me, though, about this board, which has the virtue of going across conventional locality lines. Chesterfield, for example, is part of the larger Richmond region. And there are times when there's advantages to us working together. And that's what was aimed at with this bill. But what concerned me, Amanda, and I think not me alone, was that the board is to be set up and include both elected officials and regional leaders, business people, and so forth. But this board will then be given the authority to make use of tax dollars. Mm-hmm. I really think accountability is important in that regard, and I think there's a reason why in Virginia we have insisted that it's elected leaders who are accountable to the citizens to spend tax dollars.
Well, I tell you, when I was sitting there on the Senate floor, and like I said, I have so much respect for my colleagues, but I didn't have the benefit of listening to this wise sage advice, but something inside of me just didn't sit well. I actually also voted against it, and I'm thankful. After I had a chance to talk with you later about it, I was like, okay, but then I talked to Delegate Kirk Cox, and he supported it, so then I'm like, well, now I'm really confused. But I'm so excited that we have the opportunity to explain to our listener that, sometimes people who are like-minded, I think the world of both you and Kirk, both integrity, people full of faith, and just you couldn't ask for a better, I call you guys statesmen. You're not politicians, you're statesmen. But, sometimes we can respectfully disagree even on the same issue. I also tend to, I voted against this for similar reasons. My concern was, what is the role of government? Should we be in a position, or could we put ourselves in a position where we had unelected folks? And I wondered about the constitutionality of it as well. Just, I know we had an issue back with the transportation plan many years ago with a similar situation. So let me just ask you in general. You've been in the General Assembly since 1998, and I'm sure a lot of these bills kind of come and go. What do you see in your experience is the best way for Virginia to try to grow its economy?
I think there's several things, Amanda, that can be helpful. One is continuing to maintain our status as a relatively low-tax state. Among the states of our size, we are, I would say, in that respect, in the front ranks. We have been able, over time, to maintain that. We have worked hard to limit regulation, and I think that's a very important thing when you talk to businessmen, as you and I talk to businessmen and women. One of the things that they often talk about is the amount of time and staff energy that is devoted to answering regulatory oversight. So to the extent that we can do that, I think those are important things. I think, truthfully, there are times when we have to push back on federal enactments, which is historically one of the roles of the state. One of the things that we did this year in the legislature, passed a bill that would give the General Assembly oversight as Virginia moves forward on what's called the Clean Power Plan, the President Obama's plan to put greater restrictions on carbon, including coal. We said before we go forward with that would have to be approved by the General Assembly.
Yes.
As you are probably aware, the governor vetoed that. We tried to override, came pretty close, but we were not able to override his veto. But I think that kind of thing, where we're advocating and fighting on behalf of small business and ordinary citizens in regard to things like electricity rates, that's critically important as ordinary businessmen and women are trying to keep their businesses afloat.
Absolutely, and I think that's the key point. I know we're getting a little technical today, on some of these issues of bank franchise tax and some of these other things that many of our listeners may not have heard of before, but the long and the short of it is that we're trying to lower the cost of doing business in Virginia. And if we do that based on our, reforming our tax policies and our, as you were saying, regulations, it will bring back businesses to Virginia. And it looks like we have about 30 seconds left. So just in 15 seconds or less, can you tell me, do you support corporate income tax reform? Do you support reducing the corporate income tax?
I think we've got to continue to look at that. We are number 6 in the country. In other words, lowest 6 in the country with 6th place. So I think we've got to maintain that. I think we may well, as competition increases, have to revisit that yet again.
And what about the zero-based budgeting? Is that something that you support?
I do, particularly in the times that we're facing right now, where the general economy is sluggish, very sluggish, and we're seeing that in our tax revenues. We absolutely have to revisit.
I will fight till the end. Doesn't matter what the
Thanks again for joining us today on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. This is Cut to the Chase Radio with Amanda Chase. I serve you in the State Senate in the 11th Senatorial District. And I want to thank Delegate Lee Ware. I know we had a quick, fast break there, but I just really appreciate him taking time to come on the show today and communicate with constituents. And I'm thrilled. We have a weekly town hall, and I love the opportunity to interview and talk to other legislators and experts around the state of Virginia, just so that I can help you as I'm learning my first year in office from many great legislators, like I would consider Delegate Kirk Cox, who is actually the majority leader, and he has actually served Colonial Heights, Southern Western Chesterfield since 1989. He has the additional role of serving on House Appropriations Committee. He serves on so many committees, it would take me 10 minutes just to read this list of all these. He's just incredible. I mean, love Delegate Kirk Cox. And the only beef I have with Delegate Kirk Cox is that he retired from teaching at Manchester High School, where my kids are being educated on government, and I just think he's fantastic, and I wish he would have stayed there at least a couple more years. Are you there, Delegate Cox?
I am, Amanda. It's great to be with you and cut to the chase. So thanks for the nice compliment. I love teaching and was sad to retire. It was a lot of fun.
So if we get a petition and we get enough people signed up, maybe we can get him back. Because, I love how real you are. You were a baseball coach for 14 years and very active at Colonial Heights Baptist Church, and served as a deacon there. And, that's very important for our listeners to know that about you. And I've just, I remember on my very first political event that I went to, you were there. And you've always been a hero of mine. I have so much respect for you. And I was telling Delegate Ware, I consider you both statesmen just because of your integrity. And, I cut to the chase. I am not politically correct. And everybody who knows me on the show, I just say it the way it is. But you can take things to the bank when you hear it from Delegate Kirk Cox. So we really appreciate you being on the show.
I can't thank you enough, Amanda. You're doing a great job, and I've really wanted to be on the show, so thank you for the invitation. I think it's a great service to our constituents, and that's what we need to do, is we need to go out and talk to grassroots folks. So thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate you being on. So I'm going to literally cut to the chase here. And, this month we're talking about business and obstacles to business. And, we hear the typical rhetoric, okay, cut the taxes, less regulation. And so we're trying to really say, okay, what does that look like? What does that mean to the average business owner? Like, what are things that we can do? And so I thought we could talk a little bit. I know you and I have been talking offline, about this whole Go Virginia thing. We talked a little bit with Delegate Lee Ware about that, and I said, there are a lot of different ways that we want to do this. We talked a little bit about trying to bring banking jobs back to Virginia by hopefully eliminating some of the bank franchise tax laws that we have, and anything that we can do to reduce those taxes and regulation. But could you explain to us a little bit more about Go Virginia? And it really has some positive qualities that I do like about it. Like, it's much better than what we had before. So maybe you could talk about the way the system was before and kind of what Go Virginia tries to do.
No, I'd be glad to. Really, we have two challenges in economic development, Amanda. One is we have a very slow economy in Virginia, which a lot of people, I'm not sure, realize. In 2014, we had 0% growth. We ranked 48 out of 50 states in growth, and we fall into 13th on the CNBC Top States for Business. So that's our first problem. But our second problem is we spend a lot on economic development. As a matter of fact, we have spent an incredible amount of money, $679 million since 2010. And so my thought was, are we getting the bang for the buck? And the way we do things, is that correct? And the way we do it is we have all these pots of money. We have the Governor's Opportunity Fund that was renamed the Commonwealth Opportunity Fund. And we sort of, to me, in some ways, haphazardly go after businesses. We don't really, do an assessment of how good our workforce is, whether we have the right training skills, what is business actually saying will work, et cetera. And so my thought with Go Virginia was, let's try to have one program that's more of a bottom-up grassroots program, not a top-down program, and let's see if we can turn things around a little bit, sort of doing it that way. So that was sort of the concept of Go Virginia, and the way it would work would be, and I'll try to give you a quick example, is you have a state board and you have regional boards, and they both must have a majority of business folks. And the theory is you bring to the table, educators, people from local government, higher ed, but mainly business, and you do a skills gap analysis locally. So you sort of figure out...
Delegate Cox, we're going to come back in about 3 minutes. You hold that thought, because everybody is hanging on your every last word, and they want to hear what you have to say. So stay tuned. Welcome back to WNTW 820 AM, The Answer. You've reached Cut to the Chase weekly town hall. And on the phone, I'm so excited to have Delegate Lee Ware. He was on earlier. We have the majority leader, Delegate Kirk Cox, on the line. And we were talking about Go Virginia, which is, I'm going to let you explain more about it because you're doing such a great job. And everybody left. They're sitting on the edge of their seat and they can't wait to hear more about Go Virginia. So go for it.
And I'll try to condense it as quickly as possible, but what I was saying is the key is to find out in your region what skills are missing. I mean, is it welders? What is it? There are technical skills. And what Go Virginia would do, these business councils with educators would get together, do a skill gaps analysis, see what we're missing, and see what industry clusters would work. Quick example, go down to Prince George County, and you'll see we have Rolls-Royce, we have advanced manufacturing and advanced logistics, and we're looking at standing up a really neat apprenticeship academy. That all sort of happened. That should have been a little bit more deliberate. And so the purpose of Go Virginia is let's see what people locally think will work. Let's build a model from there instead of having the state always trying to decide, hey, I think this is going to work. And I'll give you a quick example. As you say, I've been on appropriations for 10 years. We have all these folks coming to us and saying, fund this, fund that, fund our project. And we're citizen legislators, so they put a STEAM or a STEM stamp and go, hey, this is a great STEM idea. It doesn't really fit in with the region, doesn't fit in with anything, and it's just very hard to do an analysis. Instead of doing all that hodgepodge of programs, let's have the people on the ground that know what they're doing come up with proposals that we can vet. And the way Go Virginia works is we scored them in a very tough manner. I mean, there are clawback provisions. These don't go to individual corporations. And basically, you're scored on your efficiency, how much money you save as far as your collaboration goes, and you really have to, every project must fit your plan. So it's just a different model that I'm excited about. Hopefully, I think it'll replace down the road almost all old models. And my vision down the road, Amanda, is it saves us money because instead of having 10 or 12 different economic development programs, we have one that just makes more sense from a grassroots perspective.
Well, I certainly think it's better than what we're doing now, but any hesitation, I know one of the things that myself and Delegate Lee Ware and a couple of others had concerns about was the setting up of a board that would include non-elected officials. Can you kind of maybe educate us or give us some insight on?
Actually, I think that's the strength of the proposal because the problem currently is whenever you try to get localities to cooperate, rightly your government officials are looking out for their locality. If you ask a businessman why does he locate there, he will tell you, and I don't believe in regionalism, regional government all, but he will tell you, we locate basically according to a metropolitan region. How good is the school system? Your supply chain doesn't stop in Colonial Heights and Chesterfield. So the beauty, I think, of having a regional board that has business folks that are outside of government is they can give you a much better assessment of what vocational courses you should be teaching in high schools, where the jobs are, et cetera. And so that's, to me, the strength, not the non-strength of the program. If all you have is government officials and state officials on the board, I think you can get the same results you've gotten for years, and that's pet projects, and that's fighting between different governmental entities. So I actually think that's a strength, not a weakness.
Very good. Well, like I was telling our listeners earlier, I said, we have every person that comes on the show, high integrity, great people. And I said, sometimes we agree on things and sometimes we disagree, but it's important that we educate and inform constituents, because there are two sides to every story and they need to know both sides. Sometimes people get so wrapped around, one particular thing. And I think it's good that we go in open-minded and, listen to everybody. Real quick. Tell me, just in general, growing the economy here in Virginia, what are some other ideas that you have as far as maybe corporate income tax reduction, personal income tax reform, maybe reforming BPOL? What are some ideas maybe that you have?
Well, let me do taxes in a second. The big thing we're going to push this year on the House side is regulatory reform. And one of the things that we really want to do is try to remove some of the barriers to licensure, and reducing the instances of where government's basically giving you permission to work. And this is huge among millennials. So many barriers to getting into professions, from, hair braiding to almost every profession you can think of. We just built up all these requirements. Some take, 1 or 2 years of licensure training, and they shouldn't. And so one of the things we're really going to look at is a whole host of these occupations and what can we do there. On taxes, Amanda, we need tax cuts, but I do think we also need comprehensive tax reform, and that can't be a code word for raising taxes. That's ultimately got to be some tax cuts, and you've mentioned some good ones. Candidly, I think a governor's going to have to drive that. I know I've talked to one of the gubernatorial candidates, Ed Gillespie, who has I think taxes is probably his big issue. I think it probably takes the governor's campaign to really push that issue, but it's got to happen because, as you said, between BPOL, machinery and tools tax, et cetera, we got to look at some tax cuts there, and I think we have to look at some tax cuts on the more general side as far as people goes. But you got to make sure that all works. What I don't want to do is eliminate 2 or 3 tax credits, spend that money, and really end up where it's going to make it more difficult for us to do comprehensive, I think, tax reform that will lead to some tax cuts.
And, speaking to that note, we were talking about the budget shortfall. I mean, there's so many teachers out there and state workers out there who are really looking forward to that 2% pay increase that they're not going to get. Can you offer them some reassurance or kind of tell us where we are on that whole budget shortfall?
We're about $1.5 billion shortfall. One of the problems is, to be just blunt, is the Obama economy. We have a bunch of part-time jobs. The unemployment rate is very deceiving because we're getting a lot of folks whose weekly wages are going down, and so we're growing at much less pace than we have in the past, and that's a real problem. We're going to have to figure that out, and that's why I think we're going to need things like tax cuts and Go Virginia. But for 2017, there won't be any raises, and I think that's a real shame. I taught for 30 years. We will certainly go back in 2018 and look at that. Our August revenue figures were pretty good. That was a good sign. We have to sort of see how September comes out. But I do think there's a real commitment to try to go back in 2018 and see if we can do any portion of the 3% raise for state employees and the 2% raise for teachers. And I'm particularly concerned, Amanda, about law enforcement. We're going to have to do something on the state police side.
Delegate Cox, we're out of time, but I am so thankful you were able to come on the show today. I really appreciate it. I know you're so busy, and we're so blessed and thankful to have you on today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us today on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. This is Amanda Chase, your state senator, serving you in the General Assembly in the 11th Senatorial District, which includes Chesterfield, Amelia, and Colonial Heights. And today we are wrapping up our Thursday town hall for the week, Cut to the Chase radio show. And it's an honor to be here. And, we've had some really amazing guests to come on our show. Really appreciate Delegate Lee Ware and the Majority Leader, Kirk Cox, coming on today. Fantastic folks. Next week, before I forget, we have Senators Jill Vogel and Senators Bryce Reeves, both running for lieutenant governor, coming on next week. And you'll want to hear from them. That race is next year. That's right. In Virginia, there is a race every year. So you always have that to look forward to. And I'd also like to remind you to tune into the Lee Brothers, who are on Fridays from 3 to 6 p.m. And they're a lot of fun. And I love that they're not politically correct. They're my heroes, and I love hearing them. So let's just talk about what we've learned today. There's so much here that I want to say to you. We run on these issues about less as conservatives, as Republicans, that we want to cut taxes, reduce regulations, and there's so many different ways to do that, and we have different ideas on that, and that's great. But it's important that we communicate and talk with you, our listeners. We want your feedback. Email my office. Let us know what you think about some of the things that we've talked about today. We talked about Go Virginia. I'm going to continue this conversation. I love to hear both sides. It's just kind of like whenever I'm at home with my kids and one of them is just so adamant that something is a certain way, and you're just so convinced that's the right way to go. But then I have learned that there are two sides to every story. So it's always important to hear the opposing side. And before I make any decision on a bill, it is my desire, my goal, and I strive to do this with every bill, is to hear both sides of the bill. Because you even have, as I've mentioned on the show today, two fantastic conservative Republicans with differing views. So I think it's good to hear both and kind of make up our own mind. And, I'm still, quite honestly, asking questions. I did vote against Go Virginia for the concerns that we stated here, just having non-elected officials authorizing the use of taxpayer funds. Some of the Tea Party folks in my district, I don't know how they would feel about that. I think I do know how they would feel about that. I don't think they would like it so much. But, we're going to continue to talk through that. So the last thing that we're going to talk about in this last 30 seconds is that I need you guys to call in. I want to hear from you. 804-454-1366. If you have any issues that you want to bring up and talk about, I can tell you in upcoming shows, we're going to be talking about Convention of States, which I know a lot of people have been talking to me about. A lot of people are asking me to consider legalizing medical use of marijuana, and I can tell you I have some very strong thoughts on that as well. So tune in. It's always going to be exciting. Tune in here every Thursday from 4 to 5. WNTW Radio, 820 AM The Answer.